My name is Eric Pogi Sumangil. I'm an actor and a playwright, and I like to identify that with the umbrella of storyteller. I am Filipino-American. I am a brown guy. I am a burger whisperer, a part-time hand model, a lady in the street, but a freak in the bed. It's
a brilliant description. We should all have such a handle on who we are. And from what I know you as Pogi.
Yes.
Like that's what you're called. So
yes.
Just so other folks know, I'm not making the choice to be like, that is what I'll refer to you as.
That Pogi is in quotes. It's a nickname. So
right.
Yeah.
But I often forget you even have other names.
Sure.
If I don't look at a program that's involved with you, it's just.
Well, the name thing is a whole other rabbit hole that we can go down. But so.
Well, so you said brown guy.
Yeah.
And I think that actually raises this, because there's a thing that I want to hear you talk about, which is people, you have enough melanin in your skin that people wonder what's up.
Yeah.
But it's not obvious. It's harder to make an assumption about it.
Right.
And that's what people want to do. They want to look at somebody and be like, all right, I know what you are. I've got all my list of... So, I am curious how that shows itself in your life. What do people do or say to you that you're like, oh, you're trying to figure something out right now?
Yeah. It's interesting. I live currently in a predominantly Latino neighborhood right now. And the amount of people that speak Spanish to me in my building and, when I'm in shops and stuff is...
And you're not walking around speaking Spanish.
I don't speak Spanish. I studied it in high school and a little in college, but I don't speak Spanish. So there's that awkward moment where I vaguely understand what they're saying to me. And I kind of respond in English, or if I know a Spanish response, I'll respond because my heritage is Spanish, and that's a whole other thing. But there's a lot of, sometimes you can tell when someone's really trying to figure you out without saying it, without directly asking the awkward question, where are you from, or what ethnicity are you? I think people are trying to be generous. They're trying to be, they're trying, they rather than ask the awkward question, they're trying to just figure out in a different way.
What's the sideways question into that?
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
Sometimes it's stuff like that where where did you grow up?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, just western suburbs, and then, so and
not helpful at all.
Yeah, all the information is in that. It's and then you have to go. Oh, well, let me just tell you so that we don't have to play the game. But yeah, I think for me, it's an interesting thing I've been thinking about a lot lately. Going back to kind of the Latino kind of Spanish thing, is I also identify outside of the racial binary, which when people talk about race, it's usually in terms of black and white. When you talk about the Oscars and Oscars so white, immediately it was about black actors. And so when there's this invisibility of people outside the binary discussions of race, it becomes about well, where are you from in that argument, or in this discussion, where are you coming from?
Yeah.
And then you add layer to it that as a Filipino-American, we're typically categorized as Asian Americans. And so there's a whole model minority thing that's on top of that, which is a very weird, you're one of the good ones kind of idea, And so it just becomes this very strange kind of conversation around race that often starts at a very meaningful and very open place when you meet someone.
Yeah.
It's people are really just trying to figure out how to categorize you, and I think that's just a human thing.
Yeah.
It's we tend to want to be able to make sense of things that are unfamiliar, and one way to do that is we ask about people's jobs usually, and I'm trying to get out of the habit of when you meet someone, the first question is well, what do you do? What are the things that you do?
Yeah.
And so I have my own awkwardness around trying to come up with a different question or a different thing.
It's a hard one because what do you care about?
Right. Yeah. What are the things that are really, really important to you? I don't know. That would be an odd question to ask just right off the bat to a stranger. But I think we have those polite questions, that list of polite questions that people go through, and I don't know how meaningful it is. I don't know how much you gain from being you work in the accounting side of, Best Buy. does not clear up any.
No, that doesn't make it. That doesn't move you any further along the conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah,
I feel less connected to you now. What else do you have?
Right.
Because it does feel like that's all just a way of saying, how can I talk to you?
Right.
It's all, we're trying to find that.
Yeah.
But why we can't just say that? Like, what should we talk about?
Right. Yeah. I sometimes, I've struck up conversations with people because of what was on their T-shirt and things like that make it a little bit easier because we automatically are like, oh, we're into some similar things. Like that helps. But I think sometimes I question whether or not, knowing someone's racial background in this day and age really is of value in the sense of like, can I have a conversation with you? Can I talk to you about something? But it also happens at a point where you're friends with somebody, you're into some sort of established like friendship, relationship, or working relationship, and then the questions start coming out because now they feel comfortable with you. So it becomes a different thing where they can say, oh, okay, well, so do you mind if I ask you? And then it's like a whole other. It's a whole other.
But you build trust with that person too, so that I think that's a different.
Right, absolutely, engagement. And I think it makes me feel good, and that's just speaking for some people get annoyed by it, but it makes me feel good that people feel like they can ask those questions after you've kind of established that level of trust.
Well, I'm curious because you have an awareness of your sort of cultural heritage and your identity, and I know it's something you think about. You've done work. Like you've done stage-related work that touches on your own identity and around just sort of people. You've been in a lot of productions around people's identity and people's stories. But I'm wondering if you've gone through a period of even like heightened awareness or minimized awareness of how you're treated based on those. Like, were you always walking through life aware that people were trying to put you in a category? Did you feel sometimes you had weird privileges of being in that model minority category, and then other times where you're like, oh, I'm being super oppressed by this too because I don't even get to be a part? Like, it seems like you've got some stability around that, but I wonder what that journey has been like in trying to figure out, like, you don't get to do as much sense of self because first you have to dispatch with the world self that it's put on you. Like, I get to be Levi and figure out like, who's Levi? Because I'm the default setting of all the spaces. Like, when people meet me, they're like, what, more and more now, they're like, who have you hurt today? Because I'm a white man, so like that's, but it's a different set of baggage. So I'm wondering like how aware you've been in your life.
Yeah, I think it's funny. That's a really, really interesting question because I look back on my like early actor, my baby actor days like that, as being like, I'm a chameleon. I can play any part, and there's that idealism that comes with that, like when you're just starting out. And for me, that was exactly that moment of not being particularly aware of how people see me. I knew that there's castability in certain shows that you can like find those roles and then audition for those shows, but those are pretty few and far between, and so you end up doing the thing where it's just like you have this bravado about yourself, like I'll go into there, I'll audition for 1776 and let's see what happens, and I'll prove it to them, right? And so there is a little bit of that, and that's not to say.
How'd that go? Did you get that part?
I did not. Surprisingly, I think it was because I don't. Maybe now that it's been rewritten a little bit, but I think that idea, you realize like, oh no, I'm a specific look, and that has nothing to do with my race. Like,
that's true in acting in general.
No matter where you go, and so
your hair is too brown. Like,
right, exactly. And when I started doing on camera work, it's very apparent because you're just you're just churning through these auditions that you show up and you can feel when you're not the right kind of person that they're looking for, whether or not that's about your race or your ethnicity. But I'll add to that and say that sometimes you don't know, and those are the questions that you ask yourself that start messing with your head.
Yeah, like, is that why?
Yeah, you have to add that why? Yeah, is it because of that, or is it because I'm just a horrible actor today? Like, I just did a bad job in the room, and that's entirely possible too. But
not Pogi.
I mean, I never.
No.
I've never failed in my life. But yeah. No, I mean, I think it's that sense of, in this particular business, in the acting world, when when you're just coming out, you feel like you're gonna revolutionize everything, and then you realize that other people see you differently. And the thing now that I'm realizing, or is becoming more apparent, is like sometimes you're not even allowed in the room to show them if you can do that. And so when you don't get a callback, or when you don't get, even when you submit your headshot, you don't get an audition, it's like, oh, okay. But sometimes it's about my skill set. Sometimes I can do these things, and maybe they don't know that. Especially when it comes to the trend now, and I think that one of the growing pains that the industry is going through is this, everyone wants to cast diversity, quote unquote diversity, in its like truest form. So if you are casting a show that has, an Asian American actor, you ask the Asian Americans, and you want an Asian American actor.
Right, you can't just cast someone who maybe looks like an Asian American.
Right, and so now what I'm realizing is that for Filipinos, it's very different. We're typically, because of geography, labeled Asian American, but culturally, because we were a Spanish colony for so many years, we're culturally similar to Central and South America. So are we eligible to audition and be cast in those roles without rocking the boat too much? That's a legitimate question. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because I would argue that, if the role is a Mexican, for example, and you hire someone from the Dominican Republic, is that as far removed as someone from the Philippines, or someone from Puerto Rico, or Argentina, or something like that? So is it about that? And then you have to go, how many producers out there have the cultural competency to know that about history? And are they studying that enough to go, oh, I should or I shouldn't invite this person into this audition because of their racial identity?
Is it geographical distance?
Right.
Is it cultural overlay?
And so when I think about that, I kind of go, well, can I play? Should I submit for these things? Do I need to add an explanation?
Right. Just so you know.
Just so you know. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because I don't know that they know that.
No.
And I don't want to be insulting to them either. But at the same time, they might be thinking, oh, well, but he's Asian.
Yeah.
We can't do that because that would be appropriating in a weird way.
What a strange challenge to have to be sort of walking through. Because the job is already so heavily based on your outward appearance.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes deeper than that. Real acting is more than skin deep.
Sure.
I'm profound.
Yeah.
But it starts there. That's a weird, either a hindrance or advantage of
Oh yeah, and I definitely recognize that my privilege in this business is that,
especially in the Midwest.
In the Midwest, is that with on-camera work, especially here in the Twin Cities, where there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and they shoot a lot of training videos here for these big companies, and they want a diverse look in the cast of people that they're hiring. So I know that I have a leg up when I go into those auditions, because there might be 50 white actors that come in and maybe 5 or 6 people of color that come in, and they want this video is going to go to the San Diegos and the New York Cities and all over the country, and they want those people to see themselves portrayed in their corporate training video.
Yeah.
And so I know that I've gotten work because of that, and I know that it works out for me. That's a privilege of mine.
What do you think of that kind of tokenizing? Because that is, you're still being a token.
Yeah.
It's just, you get a gig out of it.
Sure. And I think is
there a cost benefit ratio?
Yeah, a little bit, because I think, and I've done this in theater as well, I think that sometimes you get to have a conversation with a director or a producer that wouldn't otherwise have happened when it comes to that kind of work. And I think that sometimes there aren't that many plays that have people that look like me in a prominent role that isn't totally written in a long time ago with a different idea, and so if that's the kind of thing, that other thing that balances out, that I can also work in this realm and be more castable in a different thing. That's how I kind of rationalize that in my brain, at least. I don't know if it's right. I think part of it is, for me, just that I can then prove that I'm a good actor, that I'm not I'm not just
right.
Some guy that he looks it, so we'll just maybe not have him speak a lot. And, I don't think they're doing that. I think that they're seeing someone who hopefully who happens to be a person of color that is a good actor.
Right. You're capitalizing on that opportunity.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the part of what that is maybe some casting directors, some directors have less experience, like they aren't aware that they're making some decisions through their filter of, I just found the best actor, rather than not being aware of, like, maybe the casting call didn't go out to actors of color as many as it did to sort of all the white folks.
Yeah.
So they have less exposure, and suddenly you get in the door and you get a gig, and then if you're not good, you are suddenly a representative for a whole group of people. Does that weigh on your mind?
Oh, yeah. All the time. I think more often than not, I think working in the acting business, I feel like I'm representative of other folks that look like me, because they might be taking a chance, they might be following a trend. Like right now, it feels like people want.
Or someone yelled at them. They're like, all right.
Oh yeah, or somebody, or they were told, or they were said that something was like, we can't have an all-white cast, so we need to have somebody, and that's honestly one of my anxieties is that did I really earn this part, even though contracts are signed and I'm there in rehearsal.
I mean, I think everyone has those words.
They're good. That's good to know. Yeah, I just think it's like, well, is it really just because of the way I look and not because of the talent and the thing that whatever it is that I might bring to the part. But yeah, I think that there is that, you just get we're just self-conscious people.
Yeah, I think to be a good artist, you have to have thin skin. To be vulnerable,
right?
And then suddenly you're very easy to hurt.
Yeah,
your skin is so thin. Right. Like, you have to not get jaded, or you won't be able to connect through either a camera or directly to audiences. But then, if you aren't jaded, then someone could just knock the wind out of you with a maybe not that hard of a touch.
Yeah.
Do you have to work to stay that way too? Like, have you had experiences where you could have easily become really standoffish? Because you, in my experience, are very open and very approachable and welcoming. Like, I feel like you do some ambassadorship for the theater community.
Sure.
Like, you work on big theater conference and you do a lot of that kind of. You help other people do their communication work and do their sort of how to build audience. And I could see having negative experiences just being treated because you look a certain way in what is predominantly like sort of been a white city in a white state.
Sure.
Could make you like have to sort of thicken your skin and be a little more standoffish. Is that something you've had to work to maintain, or does that come naturally to you, or do you not? Or am I suddenly making you realize you should be doing it? Now you're going to be all jaded.
Well, now that you mention it.
You bastard.
No, I think that comes with experience in the business more than anything else. And I don't know that that's necessarily an aspect of how I move through the world ethnically, but I think that...
So I can't attribute everything to your ethnicity?
I mean, you can.
But it's wrong.
No, I mean, I think just having the kind of experience, the years of experience that I've had, you learn to by whatever means to forget about the auditions that you go on, and sometimes it's harder. Sometimes, and I'll be totally honest and say that when it's a part for a person of color, or part for somebody that has exactly a certain skill that I have that like very few other people might have, I start to kind of go, well, why didn't I get that part? Because I can't be competing with everybody on this. Yeah. So it's a little bit more difficult, and it's still a process. I'm not great at it, but I try as much as possible. And the volume of auditions you go on helps that, because then you kind of go like, oh, okay, so definitely not going to get everything. So it's just going to be that road, But yeah, I think you start to understand how you're perceived. And then if you want to be able to manipulate that within yourself, or put on a show for someone to show a different side of you, then you can do that. But if you don't know how you're perceived, then there's no way to kind of work with that. I mean, it's like that's the lump of clay that you have.
Yeah.
But if you don't know you have that, then you can't make the thing.
I like that. Like, you're aware of this tool.
Yeah, and it can be, and it's not. That's not the. It's not. I don't know if people will appreciate that. You know what I mean? But it is something that you can use to your advantage or not.
Yeah.
I know that in the 70s, Randall Duck Kim, who is from around here in the Midwest, who's an actor in the movies now, and he is a great Shakespearean actor, but he's Korean American, I think. He's Asian American, and he played Hamlet at the Guthrie in the 70s. I mean, if you can imagine that, he played Hamlet, and he was so used to putting prosthetics and different kind of makeup on to hide his ethnicity that when they said you're going to play Hamlet and you're just going to do it as yourself and you're going to do it as an Asian man, it becomes an awkward thing because he's used to having all of this other stuff, playing with his age and playing with all of that, big long beards and fat suits and stuff, to be able to, because he has that talent and that range for himself to be able to play those parts. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting thing that was what was in his mind necessary at the time, and we've moved very much away from that. We're not going to try to hide our ethnicity on stage anymore, nor is it acceptable to put on someone else's ethnicity on stage.
You're not even allowed to.
Yeah, and so I think that's a product of the culture changing around us and being able to say, like, we want representation and we want, to a certain degree, authentic representation, whatever that means.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, and I think you've really kind of captured that it's an evolving process where we feel progress in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow that's also highlighted how much more ways to go there is.
Yeah.
Around, even literally around representation, like who is on stage and whose stories are on stage.
Right, yeah,
still,
exactly.
Like, I feel like sort of infancy around really being thoughtful about that in lots of ways.
Yeah, and I think you have to always fight against, but there are these classic plays and these, all of these, and, is my presence in a play like a statement that you don't want to make?
Well, yeah, what is that? How does that, I mean, Randy Reyes, who's a wonderful, not only actor, but director and sort of advocate for artists. And he once told me, just because he's an Asian American, him being on stage was a political act.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting, but also it doesn't have a choice. Like, it always is saying something.
Yeah.
And that it was sort of pointing out, like, that isn't necessarily true for someone like me. And I wonder if the thought is there'll ever come a day where that's not true, and if that is what progress feels like, that you could just be on stage and it's not remarkable or interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we're going to see that in our lifetime, but maybe. Like, it would be great if that were the case, because I think people right now are really hungry for other people's stories, and they want to learn something. They want to come away from the theater learning, having seen something that they haven't seen before. Which is not necessarily always the case. Some people just want to have a good laugh and then go out for coffee.
Yeah.
And that to me is like just the death of, you know what I mean? Like, if you just like, if you're walking through the lobby. It's the coffee that really bothers me.
I think I understand.
I'm really pushing ice cream. I think dessert and ice cream should be. Okay.
I mean, that's contentious.
Right. And I mean, if we disagree, that's fine. I just think that.
Is it? This is.
We'll take the recording down and we'll fight, and then we'll continue.
Seems best. Just really got extreme fast.
No, but I think that I personally, as an actor and a playwright, want people walking through the lobby being like, "This is how I felt about it." Whether or not they liked it, that is secondary to me. I would much rather have, if someone were to see me and know that I was a part of the show, I would much rather have them get in my face and say, "You know what? I totally disagree with what you said and what you did and all of these things," and want to have that conversation with me, or at least want to just get it off whatever they're thinking of, just get that off their chest. I would much rather have that happen than somebody go, "Oh, that was cute. Do you want to go get coffee because coffee is the enemy?"
No. You'd rather someone say, "I hate you, let's go get ice cream."
Right, exactly. That's what I want to have happen.
I get it. That's criticism you want, like the write-up.
Yeah.
So terrible that I ate Haagen-Dazs after.
No, but I just want to have somebody have a reaction.
Yeah, because
have an opinion about
empty calorie art is not exciting.
Yeah,
I mean,
right, exactly.
And there's still a fair amount of that. But I think people want meaning in what they're taking in.
Yeah, and people want it to be relevant to their own lives.
Yeah.
And so that's what I find difficult sometimes about doing really ethnically specific work is, I've used the phrase, it's like being in a zoo, like feeling like this is like a zoo show, because you're just going to see these people in their natural habitat behind glass, and then you're going to go and be like, oh, now I've seen that, and now I maybe feel like I know something about that community, rather than relating it back to your life. And how does that translate?
Yeah, you don't want to do something that creates distance between yourself and the audience. You want to get closer to them. Yeah. And that zoo thing is it's very passive, which you don't want from a theater audience. Like, you want them to feel like sort of tired from having done something.
Yeah, they've gone on a journey, for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if we can talk about immigration and immigrants.
Yeah.
Because you've touched on some nice, like, sort of progress and hunger and awareness of things needing to change, especially in, like, theater and film and television and representation. And it does feel like we're making some changes, slow as they can be at times. At the exact same time, we're, like, in the thick of really accelerated unpleasantness towards the idea of immigrants and refugees. Yeah. Not just in the U.S. I don't know if you know about Brexit. That is also seems seems very tied. I know you know about it. This is the condescension phase. Let me explain the world.
Could you explain it to me? Because
but you have a family that has immigration. Like, you have immigration not that far back in your past.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much you have thought about that, and how much you think about it sort of amidst these really heated conversations about who can go where and why they should and shouldn't, and who's the problem, and how much of that is on your mind now, and sort of how you're thinking about that stuff.
Well, it's interesting. Well, first I'll say I think one of my cousins just got here last week.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my aunt who immigrated here probably a decade ago. And then is bringing her kids over. So my cousins are just there. I think the first of them to come was maybe a year ago, and so they're acclimating. But they're older than some of my other cousins who came here as teenagers. And when I was born here, my parents came here in the '60s. And man, I'm actually, I think about this a lot. I'm really glad that they ended up in Minnesota. Because as foreign as the topography might be from the Philippines to the snowy north, they were supposed to go to Cleveland. My mom had a job lined up in Cleveland and stopped here because my uncle was working here at Norwest Bank, and so they were like, oh well, this is our only family in the country, why don't we just stay here? And so they never made it to Ohio, which I'm very happy about. I don't know why I have this this bias against Cleveland, Ohio, but
yours, Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they rock, but I don't think so.
Song.
Yeah, but I would have been a Browns fan. Like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, as a Brown guy, maybe, but like,
it's too on the nose.
It's a little obvious. So my family, a group of my cousins and aunts and uncles came in the late '80s, and then in the '90s, and then I think in the early, maybe the late '90s or early 2000s, and so that's a constant process for us, for my family to see a wave of new
family and you're getting to see people being immigrants to a new thing for them.
Yeah,
that you know very well, firsthand.
Right, and to help them acclimate to what American life is like. And even make the decision to go back. I've had relatives go back to the Philippines after being here for a while. So it's interesting because there are very conservative people in my family and very liberal people. We just are our own spectrum in the family, and so it's interesting, now with Facebook, to see those conversations happening between brothers and sisters who are immigrants, and they have these kinds of weird, in my opinion, weird leanings. And I'm just kind of like, you guys know that they're talking about you, right? You know, and I had to frame that for a few people while the election was going on. While, you know, we're in this campaign season, I had to say to actually the father of someone that I grew up with who was commenting on all my stuff for some reason. And he was a Trump supporter, and I kind of said, you know that I know how you immigrated here. I had to just kind of say that. Story. And I said, I know how, if you need to back off, otherwise I'm going to start telling the truth. And that's just because the truth is easy for me because it's the simplest thing. It's not, you know, when you have to start like covering things for people, it just becomes like, well, I have to remember that now. I have to work on that. And I'm like, I don't have enough brain space for that.
It's a
so it's just simple, right? Exactly. It's Three's Company, you know, like all over again, right? But so I kind of had to say that. And next thing I know, he blocked me, and I was just kind of like, all right, I didn't threaten to out you. I'm just trying to give you perspective on like you coming here and staying past your visa time, and that being something that trickled through the community that we all knew, and people donated to help you, and we were all a part of that. And your kids may or may not even have known that status about themselves or about their family. And so to have someone who is voting for someone who's saying disparaging things about immigrants in general and illegal immigrants or people who are undocumented, like it becomes a very different thing. And one interaction that my family has had was, you know, a really, really long Facebook thread. And I think my sensibility of my, you know, a couple of my cousins is that they like to jab each other every once in a while. So that's what was going on in this thread. And so at the bottom, and this was probably just the peak of my frustration with it, but at the bottom of the thread was my note that was just like, so your dad, my uncle who just passed away last year, promised my mom that the next wave of cousins or family members that come over is going to be taken care of by his children, because you've been here for 30 years and now your families are established, your kids are out of college and off on their own. He said that you're supposed to now be taking care of this new people. Why are they staying with my parents? And like, so if you think, as was posited in this like thread, if you think that the family, the quote unquote family and churches should be taking care of these immigrant communities that are coming in, why don't you be that family and stop putting the burden on my parents who are growing older? And then like nothing, no responses, nothing left. And I just kind of said, all right, so now we know where we stand, because you're going to say something, but you're not going to follow through with it. And that to me is the thing that bothers me. Like whatever your political leanings might be, just be true to your word. Just be someone that I can rely on, will be consistent. And so that's what bothered me about that interaction, because I was like, well, all right, so you say this, but you don't want to do it. So that's the problem. That's actually the issue that we're talking about, is that people want to spout these like political ideologies, but they don't want to back it up with action.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the immigrant thing, it was really hard for me, because I had to convince people that when you walk down the street with the rhetoric that's going on politically and in the media and on the news and all of that, that person that hates immigrants can't tell if you have your papers or not. They can tell that you're a brown person, you might be Mexican, you might look a certain way, and that's the image that's in their head when they think of an undocumented immigrant. So if you're in favor of that, of someone like Trump who's saying he's going to do all these things, then you're actually enacting potential violence on you and your family. And that's like really, really hard for me to be okay with.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and to me, it's a lack of like thinking that through.
Yeah. I mean, I get enough frustration from being okay with that towards anyone.
Yeah.
Like without having to do the logical explanation of like, you're hurting yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
It should be enough of like, you're hurting people, right? Like I would like, I mean, I know I'm like idealistic or something, but like I have a hard time getting past that piece of just like, don't you think if we help everyone else, like they'll be in a better place and then they won't want to hurt us either? Like that is how I actually think.
Yeah.
So I do have a hard time getting into the like headspace of like I got to protect my own it seems like it must be. I don't know how you just aren't walking around in frustration all the time if you are living that close to those. I mean, that's a cognitive dissonance, like where you're like, wait, you're literally saying something that is about yourself that like that you aren't. I mean, if that is the most petty you get, that is just like, why aren't you sending checks to my parents? Like, that's pretty measured.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the
you might use swears or something. I
I do swear a lot, I think, but I do walk around with a lot of frustration. Some days.
What do you do with that?
I don't know. I mean, I honestly I haven't
beating people to death.
I draw my curtains and sit in silence.
Just have a cry.
I just have a good cry. I mean, yoga helps, to be honest. Like I do some yoga, so I'm like that helps. But sometimes it's really tough because sometimes you just have to get it out, right? You have to have that conversation, and so when you talk to people about it, going back to this idea of what questions do you wish like would just go away is why, like anything that starts with like why can't you just like that, for me is like that's the worst thing to say to me, because sometimes I just need to vent, and I think I need to I try as much as possible to kind of front load that idea. I'm just going to vent to you for a little bit, and then we're just going to move on with our lives.
You don't have to solve this.
Right. You know, I think it is hard. There's this idea that's come up more recently about minority stress that has been really revived recently with, you know, the It Gets Better project and with things like that about the suicides in the LGBT community. So it's been framed around that, but then as you think about it, it's been this idea has been around for decades. And so, case in point, I'm looking for a new apartment. I'm going to move soon. And I think about it like, okay, when I call, I don't give my last name. I say my name is Eric, and I don't give my last name. I give my phone number, and I wait. And if I get a showing, if somebody wants to take me to see their place, I dress up for that. And I was like, that, when I noticed that I did that before, when I rented this place that I live now, I was like, oh, this is above and beyond what most people would probably do.
Yeah.
To go see an apartment and have like the rental company guy care how you are dressed.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes I try to control for that, because who knows? I've had those experiences where when you walk into an office with an appointment time and they go, oh, that place is rented, sorry. And I'm just like, again, like that's another question that I ask myself that I wish would go away is like, was that because of how I look? Do you think that I might not be a good tenant? Yeah. You know, like you don't get an answer to those questions. So you do kind of walk around with that level of frustration sometimes, just having to kind of navigate or just completely let go of the questions that you don't have answers to.
Well, and that's, I mean, you have to be like some enlightened Buddhist to just like, I just let those go. I just move through my mind, and then I'm fine. And then I, go back to my sand mandala. I'm fine when the wind blows away. Like, that's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just breathe through it.
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
Because it's not, I know there are people who would say like, but it was rented. Like, you don't know,
Right.
And I think the point really you're making is, but you do have to wonder, because of all the other instances where it was about how you looked and the perceptions based on your appearance.
Yeah. So
you can never be confident that it was just you being rejected as a person rather than like the idea of who you are.
Right.
Like, if someone's going to dislike you, it should be for how reprehensible your ideas are.
And there are many.
Oh, yeah. We're not even going to. But rather than just like this assumption built on past experiences or pure ignorance or whatever, like, I mean, but true like equity is like disliking somebody for who they are. It's not an argument I really want to make. Just got away from me. So you should know this, Pogi. I hate you.
Right.
I don't hate people from the Philippines.
This is personal, and it's intense and very intimate.
Yeah.
It's an intimate hatred.
It's built on specific experiences with your work.
Sure.
Which is like super hurtful. I do wonder if because you are an artist, and specifically a performing artist, where there's a whole process when you're making a show, like a live show, the rehearsal process, you're getting to know the character, you're getting to collaborate with other folks. And I shy pretty much away from the idea of like art as therapy. Like I don't think anyone stays. A lot of people get into their artistry because they got some stuff to work through.
Right.
But like stay in it and make a career out of it, like that is not sustainable.
Yeah.
But I am curious if that is a venue for you to work through some of the stuff that's not awesome that happens sometimes, where you're going to get to help tell other stories. You're going to have to work through, you get to plan a lot of emotions as an actor, and that can be a way to process, like, I need something to get me into this place. Oh, I can use that thing that really hurt and I didn't know what to do with, and I'll use that now. Like, do you find that as a tool for your performance?
Sometimes. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily those kinds of intense emotions that I don't have, I don't call on the sense memory of like discrimination or anything like that.
That's a little
very often,
little
but
too direct. Why is he always in Streetcar Named Desire?
But here's a good example of that, because I did a show at Park Square, The Realistic Joneses, and I was the first person of color, as far as I can tell from looking at other reviews and other productions, I was the first person of color to play the role of John Jones, who's one of the 4 people in the show. And it's 2 couples and 2 married couples. And so the one playing my wife was white. And there's a suggestion, and I don't know if it was ever super clear, that there might be a sexual relationship between her and the other male in the show. And that actor was also white. So one day in rehearsal, I just kind of said, so I just want to put it out there that this is an interracial couple, and she's potentially having an affair with the white guy next door, and that there's a little bit of weirdness there about that specific issue, besides the fact that in my dating life I've been cheated on, and almost every time it's been with a white person. So I think that's more just the numbers than it is about me specifically. I hope that's the case, but sometimes but there is a little bit of like, ooh, like that's a piece of the show that I might not necessarily feel great about when it comes to doing that, 6 or 8 times a week.
Yeah.
And
you were
or living
to bring that to the show.
Yeah. Right. So, but it was great to at least have that in the air and have that kind of conversation, because it was, again, like, the well-meaning white people, like people who I don't think anybody had even thought of that in the room. And I just happened to be aware of it. And so when I brought it up, they were more than willing to have the conversation, but it kind of started from the same place of like, oh, yeah, that to me wasn't part of the narrative of this play. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how casting a person of color like changes any of the dynamics in the play. And I don't think it does, but it was just an interesting thing that I knew I had baggage about. And I was I just want to put this out there because I don't want it to seem like another case of an emasculated Asian man in a story, in film or TV or on stage. And so it was a really good conversation, and I think it just it didn't necessarily pertain to the story of the play, but it was something that was very worthwhile to kind of talk out between the actors and the director.
Well, I'm sure it brought depth to the collaborative relationship too. So
I hope
play
so.
in that way.
Yeah, I think it was just something that, I don't know if there's a tangible thing that you can see that does not. That, but hopefully it did.
Because I think thanks for sharing that story. I think what it highlights is we often, when we're working with other folks, especially in sort of collaborative, creative ways, we make a set of assumed shared experiences, and it can be hard to be aware of, like, even if you grew up like in the same neighborhood, your experiences were different. So as soon as you get outside of that space, which is almost always the case, like there's vast differences of how things are experienced, and we don't often call those things out, but they really do inform the way we work together, and also I think where a lot of the conflicts come from.
And a lot of times it does go back to the kind of cultural competency aspect of the work that we do, because that script had nothing to do with identity or really like anything having to do with like that these couples were necessarily that different. Actually, they were pretty similar to one another and dealt with things differently. Right. And I always welcome the opportunity to just play a person and not have to talk about how I look and why I like the burden of the white people that have wronged me or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Subtext.
Like it's all there. It's there in all of my work. But it's like I really enjoy those opportunities to just be a person and not be a representative of an idea on stage. And so it's been pretty rare, but I hope I get more opportunities to do that, to just be a guy that is just a guy who isn't like, oh, I know something about the Asian community or about brown people now, or because of what I've just seen. It's like, oh, that's just a person who went through a thing and made choices, good or bad, and then, now it's the end of the show. Like, like hopefully.
Which is everyone's thought at the end. Every
now
audience
that's
member,
the end.
Oh, now it's the end of the show. Okay, ice cream? Well, so this thing, I often, sort of towards the end of these conversations, ask my guest for ways folks can sort of help work for change in certain areas. I'm curious about if there's things you would sort of suggest for people, if it is around how they can connect and ask questions of folks who their outward appearance is different, or if you have thoughts about like, I don't think you've said like, well, this is a huge problem and I need it fixed as much. I mean, you've gotten some thorny problems that are like specific to your industry, and that those are challenges. But I do you have any ideas about like a thing to read or a thing to think about or something to do, like, I don't know, that sort of gets at any of this stuff, or just like a people's history of the Philippines? Like, I like the idea how much we don't know that it is influenced by like. That's stuff. I only say that because that's totally what I want to go to now. Right. I know you just said like, "Hey, don't have me be teaching you about people from the Philippines." And I pull out as like, "I want to go study geography." So I have learned nothing.
Right. I mean, I think something that will help. I think, as I've been thinking about this, one of the things that comes out, I think people who are well-meaning often want to ask questions. But sometimes you just have to believe them. You just have to believe what's being told to you. Because a lot of times what I find is that people come from, what they don't say is their assumption is all things being equal. All things being equal, shouldn't just the best actor get the part? Like, shouldn't we just default to that? And you're just like, right, but all things aren't equal. And the story is coming from a certain perspective and like all of these things, right? So I think sometimes what happens is someone will say, this is a very abstract example, which is like, so this thing hurt me. This thing is hurtful to my community. And then these questions will come, and sometimes you just have to, before you ask those questions, you have to go, okay, I have to start with the premise of that thing was hurtful for that community. And I think that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
A lot of times people want to kind of disprove, well, but think about it this way.
Right.
And you're like, right, but I'm telling you that this is hurtful,
Because they're invalidating that experience.
Right. And so sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you have to like sit and think about, oh, I didn't realize that, and let me kind of figure out in my own mind how to ask a better question rather than ask a question that invalidates that feeling. Because I think I did a lot of work in sexual assault prevention over the last few years, and so one of the things that comes up a lot is when a survivor comes forward and discloses that something has happened to them, the first thing you should do is believe them. And that's such a simple thing, but it so rarely happens in both the media and society and all of this stuff. I mean, there's all of these kind of character attacks that happened that continue to happen when anything really goes down, like the whole United thing right now that just happened. People automatically went, well, is he a doctor?
Right.
Is he saying who he is? Does he have a criminal record? Does he? Not pertinent at all to what happened, to getting hit and dragged off a plane. But they want to find a way to say, well, he wasn't a great guy either. He wasn't perfect, so therefore we shouldn't care about him. Which is, that sometimes I just, when someone comes forward and says, there's a problem here, I'm hurt by this, like, the best thing to do is just say, okay, I believe that that's true. I am not someone who's trying to discredit that or argue against that. And then just take some time to kind of figure it out, maybe for yourself or with the help of that person. Or, I mean, and this is touchy because people will automatically want to be educated. And I don't know that when you're in that headspace of like, that just hurt me, that's the best place to work from to be educated.
Let's sit in your pain for a while.
Yeah, right. So, it's, I don't know what the outcome is, and I don't know what a good response is necessarily, but I think it starts with like, just believe the person who's telling you that something that happened is hurtful.
That's pretty, that's pretty big. Like, that's a big assignment. Like, that is very doable, but also like, do it. Like,
right.
Be aware of how often you don't do it. I think is a really good activity for someone to do.
Yeah.
Just like, think you have that instinct of, because it is sort of a denial.
Right.
Where can people go to connect with you on the internet or find out when you have shows, or do you have a good place?
Sure. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. My handle is Wiley Filipino, which I don't know, as a comedy guy, if you know that reference, it was a Brando quote that Steve Martin wrote an essay about. Brando at some point said that he said something disparaging about Jewish people running Hollywood, and lumped in with that was like the wily Filipino. And I think everyone collectively just went, wait, what? Like, did he just? And so Steve Martin wrote this great essay about the wily Filipinos that are out there.
Amazing.
And so that's my handle, Wiley Filipino. And you'll see a lot of just like weird pictures of me and the shows that I do usually, and like just backstage stuff, and like really just like ridiculous things, but also, like nature.
Yeah.
Because you got to go to the lake every once in a while. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's particularly of interest to anyone, but like, Twitter as well. And I'll try not to start too many fights with people, I guess, on social media.
It's a weird promise.
But
I'll try not to start too many
fights. Try not to start too many fights. I like to hedge my bets. You know what I mean? Like, I try not to. Not too many. But come at me, I guess is what I'm saying.
Great. Good.
Come
Strong
at me.
ending. When someone says they're hurt, listen to them and come at me. Can't think of a better ending.
Yeah, there it is.
Pogi, I really appreciate you talking to me.
Thanks for having me, man. This is really great.
Hey, Levi, it's Pogi. I'm calling to add something, because after our conversation, I thought of something else that I think is really important about what people can do to help, I think is the word that you use, but what people can do to kind of deepen and extend their understanding of other folks. And my initial thought was don't be white. I don't want it to just be about white folks, but oftentimes I hear white people say, "Oh, I'm just kind of a mutt," or "I have all of these different ethnicities, so I'm just kind of a mix of things." My suggestion would be to learn about those cultures, learn about those things, and don't just default to the easiest thing, which is just to say like, "Oh, I'm just this kind of mishmash of stuff," but I'm actually, I myself am Filipino, but I have German in my family, I have Spanish in my family, I have Chinese in my family. So for me, it was important to just understand how those cultures intermingled and what that means for me as a person. So I think that if we can do that, if we can encourage others to be studious about where they come from and to look back into their own personal history, I think people will develop more empathy for other folks from different cultures that they might not necessarily feel that they could relate to. So that was another thing that I thought of after we had our conversation. I wanted to add that to the show. Thanks for doing what you're doing, man, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Season 2 of Not About You would not be possible without the generous support of Walker West Music Academy in St. Paul. Walker West provides music education to any student who wants to learn, offering a variety of lessons for all ages and all skill levels. Go to walkerwest.org for more information. I wouldn't be able to make Not About You without the deep learning and guidance of folks I've met through my time in the Sustainable Progress Through Engaging Active Citizens program, or SPEAK, based out of Hope Community in Minneapolis. Go to hope-community.org to check out all the amazing work being done at Hope Community. Support them if you've got the resources to do so. Season 2 of Not About You would absolutely not be possible without all the amazing folks who agreed to be guests and share their valuable time and considerable experience with me. So go seek out their work and find ways to support them. And of course, this show only really has meaning if you listen and share. So thanks for listening. Now go share. Tell someone about the show. Share it on social media with the hashtag NAPOD. Post an iTunes review. Please post an iTunes review. Help me get these conversations out to more folks. The Not About You theme song is Rebels of Our Own Kind by Charlie Van Stee, used with permission from Charlie.